Aloha, Inspired Money Makers. Welcome back to Inspired Money, the live stream podcast where we invite a panel of experts to help empower us to make more, give more, and live more. In this episode, we're going to explore the future of work, navigating the changing landscape. From the rise of artificial intelligence to the growth of cloud computing, the future of work is becoming more adaptable, technologically integrated, and more flexible than ever before. It definitely feels like everything is changing so quickly. First, it was the pandemic that really forever altered our relationship with work. We proved that work is doable beyond the traditional office setting, and many employees want the ability to structure their workday to suit their personal needs and then focus on work when they feel most productive. I think that these changes will not only affect you, but your children and your grandchildren. Then there's generative AI. How might it redefine your job in the next decade, or 2 decades, or 3 decades? Understanding the future of work is crucial for everyone, whether you're a student choosing a course of study that promises a successful career, an employee looking to stay relevant in a very rapidly changing job market, or a business leader aiming to harness new technologies for competitive advantage. We know that disruption can present opportunities and challenges, and it's important to identify major trends in hopes of seizing the opportunities, avoiding falling victim to the challenges, and securing a prosperous future for yourself and for future generations. Thank you for tuning in today. Say hello if you're in the chat. If you have questions, please ask away so that together we can gain insights that will help us adapt to changes and create meaningful and successful careers. Inspired Money is brought to you by my company, Runnymede Capital Management. We help you to plan, invest, and worry less. If you need financial planning or need help with your investments, you can contact me at inspiredmoney.fm/Andy. I'm happy to point you in the right direction. I'd like to bring in our expert panel of guests. Welcome, everybody. Let me start with Charlene. Charlene Li is a renowned author, analyst, and entrepreneur who's been at the forefront of major technological transformations for the past 3 decades, helping organizations thrive through disruption. As an entrepreneur and author of 6 books, including The Disruption Mindset and Winning with Generative AI, she provides strategic insights on leadership, customer service, and the future of work. Charlene, welcome to Inspired Money.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We also have Kristofer Perez. He's a senior expert at Future Today Institute and co-founder and managing director at Global Paytech Ventures, leveraging extensive experience in fintech product design and development to guide strategic innovation and foresight, while also teaching at the NYU Stern School of Business. Kriffy, glad that you made it, despite me sending out an incorrect link.
No worries. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion. It's going to be fun.
I tested all the panelists. They all passed because they did make it here. We have Tara Vasdani, is a principal lawyer and founder of Remote Law Canada, recognized as a leading advocate for remote work and innovative legal practices, and has been named one of LinkedIn's top voices in remote work. She's an award-winning lawyer who has been nominated for Canadian Lawyers' Top 25 Most Influential Lawyers in Canada and has received multiple accolades, including the Employment Law Firm of the Year Award and Female Trailblazer of the Year by the Canadian Law Awards. Tara, welcome. Ooh, I think you're muted. Yeah, you're muted.
My apologies. I said thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm excited to have some top voices here. Rounding out the panel today, we have Al D. He's a talent and leadership development consultant, facilitator, and keynote speaker, and the founder of The Edge of Work, a firm focused on developing leaders and enhancing organizational culture. As a recognized thought leader of the future of work and leadership, his insights have been featured in Forbes, Fast Company, and Business Insider. He also hosts the Edge of Work podcast. Al, it's good to have a LinkedIn Creator Accelerator alum and fellow top voice.
It's great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
I'm excited to have all of you and to really explore this idea of the future of work. Because to me, who as like a financial advisor, I know that it's important to follow the trends and try to define where is it that we're going. But it's not an area that I think about every day. And I know that all of you are deeply ingrained in this space. So I look forward to having this discussion. Let's jump right into segment one. Remote work, accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic, has reshaped organizational operations and employee engagement. Companies have quickly adopted new technologies and policies to facilitate this shift, highlighting both benefits and challenges. Remote work allows professionals to work outside traditional office settings, while hybrid work combines remote and office time. Work-life balance is crucial to maintain well-being and avoid burnout. Cybersecurity is vital to protect data and networks in remote setups. Benefits include increased flexibility, access to broader talent pool, and enhanced productivity. Challenges include isolation, cybersecurity risks, maintaining company culture, and innovation hurdles. Strategic approaches for effective remote work involve robust communication, providing necessary resources, balancing flexibility with structure, and fostering innovation. As remote and hybrid models become more common, addressing these aspects will support both employee well-being and organizational success. So it's been 4 years since COVID-19 forced employees, employers, schools, and students to really embrace remote work. I want to ask all of you, where are we now and where do you think we're going? Charlene, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I really like the point in the opening video about balancing flexibility and structure, because I like to say that structure without flexibility is bureaucracy, and flexibility without structure is chaos. So you need a balance of the two things. And I see a lot of people still trying to figure out what that is. And one of the biggest problems, I think, is leaders aren't clear about what kind of relationship they want with their employees. And so there's this back and forth about, well, what do we want to be? How does it look like? And it doesn't lead to a fruitful discussion. But I think there's an acknowledgement that remote work is a reality because people travel. You have to enable things, even if you're completely back in the office. So flexibility with that structure is absolutely key.
How about you, Krikey?
Great question. So I think I have a strange framing opening to this, right? Which is thinking about what a corporation is and what a corporation does, right? As a strategic foresight, we like to sort of set the bounds of the conversation. And when I think of a corporation, it does two things, right? One is to do work, but then a big component of corporation is organizing people, right? And so the future of work has a very interesting component where part of it is doing the work itself, but also is how do we organize people better, right? And that's where I think a lot of this remote work comes into the discussion, right? How do we build those personal connections? How do we most effectively navigate the relationships you need to do to grow within that entity? So I kind of answer it in those two ways, right? We suddenly have an explosion of new skills that we can use and tools to build personal connections.
Yeah, let me ask a quick follow-up of you, because I know that Future Today Institute, there's an annual tech trends report that gets downloaded like 1 million times every year. What technology and science trends do you see influencing that future of work?
Very good question. I will tell you, I focus on the financial services book. But I think when you talk to what happens within the future of work, you have a big element of space, right? So people and places and spaces. What is the impact on your environment and the built environment is a big component of the future. There's a big component of how people interact. So you have a lot of the tools and the systems and the mechanisms for creating the spaces and the places to do that. And the report is a very large, very long, very extensive research that we do into all of these different topics to identify trends that are happening in the industry. So from an overall kind of, you could say, where's the tide rising? Where's the wave going?
And Al, talking about the people and what are the people doing, you work with a lot of individuals and leadership development. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I actually like Griffey's framing of this. If you think about the fundamental role of an organization, I think, as he said, one is to organize work and get work done, and the second is to bring people together. And I think where we are, at least 4 years in, is this. I think we're realizing is that very few people actually learn how to work, right? If you think about any other type of profession that is based on performance, take musicians or take athletes, before you can go and play in the NBA, you have to learn how to shoot free throws. You have to learn how to practice your form. You have to learn how to play the game of basketball. Same goes for any type of musical instrument. And I think one miss that we've collectively had over the past couple decades is that we haven't actually really taught people how to work, like of how to actually get things done. Yes, the technical skills of actually doing a task or thing, like, yeah, that sometimes happens for people, but we actually haven't really been great at actually teaching people how to like work together, how to get things done. And so as we've kind of iterated and evolved with our workplace policies over the past 4 years, I think we're learning that this was maybe a miss, and we're starting to go back to think about, well, how do we actually do that? And how do we actually help people learn how to work together so that they can actually hit the outcomes that they hit? But I have a feeling that Tara has probably been thinking about this a lot, given her background. So if I could give the rest of my time over to her, I'm sure she's got some great stuff to say.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, I never know how to start this without just giving the lawyer answer. So for me, you know, although we have seen this massive shift to remote work, the law hasn't necessarily responded. So there is still a gigantic lacuna in the law with respect to employers not quite understanding what their obligations are in the same way that Christine had alluded to, and employees not understanding what their rights are. And so, you know, although we have had this transition, there are no clear boundaries around what's acceptable and what's not, and what, for example, an employee can file a suit over and what they can't. And so I think that the law has been incredibly slow to respond. And the way that us lawyers have dealt with it is really just taking some examples and some precedents of like situations where, for example, we were working remotely prior to the pandemic. So, you know, being in an Uber on your way to work with your work cell phone, that counted as remote work. If the Uber, by some unfortunate circumstance, crashed, at that point, it would be a workplace liability issue and they would be entitled to workplace insurance policies. So, you know, the law hasn't done so great, but we are trying to adapt.
Charlene, you're muted. So if you unmute yourself, I just want to ask you, in trying to, like, how do you see companies maintaining their culture when they're trying to balance remote work, a hybrid model, or return to office?
Well, one of the biggest things is that most companies didn't pay a lot of attention to their cultures. They just let it happen. They inorganically and not very explicitly said, this is the culture we have. And so companies who are doing a really good job of hybrid and remote are being very intentional about what kind of culture they want to have. How do we get things done around here? How do we meet? Who gets to decide? How do we make decisions? How do we connect with each other? And so taking that time and that having that intentionality is the very first step of that culture. And there are many, many examples of organizations who have been 100% remote right from the very beginning and have done this very successfully.
Yeah, it's interesting to see where companies are along the spectrum, because for some, it's like only the training wheels have just come off, while others have been riding their bicycle for years. Krikey, you had something to say?
Yeah, I was I was going to add, so Future Today Institute is a fully remote company. So we've been working for years as a completely remote. So building culture is very important and very specific, and it goes through, again, building those personal relationships, right? But we have new technology to make us and enable us to do those personal relationships. But there's still an element of old school, what are you trying to do, right? You still have off team sites, you have off sites, you have team building, you have these interactions that help you build that strength so that you can use some of these new tools like a text message or an SMS or a Slack or a WhatsApp to say, hey, can we kind of reconnect and keep that bond going? Right. So that's kind of, what a big thing for me about this is sort of taking it to that 30,000 foot level of we have new technology, but we're still trying to make solve the same problems and same solutions. Right. One of the things that we spend a lot of time in business school and post business school is depending on your organization, what you see is you often have organizations, the more people you have, the more part of your job is spent navigating the organization than doing the actual work, right? And to Al's point, you go to school to learn how to, divide and subtract. You don't really go to school to learn how to navigate a corporate structure and a CEO or how to navigate all of those different interpersonal issues. Some people call it politics. It's a different game, right? And MBA school tries to help you do that, but it's not necessarily the same thing, right? So I love Al's comment of, hey, maybe we need to help everyone learn how to navigate being a tribe together in a corporation, right? The way that I would extend that into strategic foresight is we often make scenarios, right, that are supposed to compel you to think about a possible future so you can kind of backtrack and prepare for it. And the one that I always use with the future of work is, what happens when you're a citizen of a corporation, right? You're not a citizen of a country, but you're actually more affiliated and more tied to a corporation, right? It provides your benefits. It provides your social output. It provides you the opportunity for purpose. It provides you the ability to deliver work, to do something with your life. It becomes a very different paradigm than, our current interrelationship between government and corporations.
Anyone else want to add to this one?
I would just throw a couple things in there just from some of the conversations I've had and some of the research that I've seen that's put out there, just to go back off of some of the things that Krikey was saying about remote work and culture. I believe one example comes from Atlassian. If you're familiar with Atlassian, the software company, they are fully remote, fully distributed, have been for some time. They've done a lot of great internal research around some of the practices and experiments they've been running in terms of how do you improve or how do you create productivity? How do you best optimize for productivity outcomes in a remote environment? And one of the learnings that they found was that based off of some controlled experiments, that on average, if you are working remote, if you allow people to connect in person on average once a quarter through very, very focused, intentional connection time, maybe like a 2 or 3 day offsite, that's usually enough to surge them and allow them to have the ability to have that team cohesion until the next quarter. And so they've tried to start to roll that out throughout the rest of the organization on a consistent basis to maintain that culture and connection, to be able to drive the productivity that they want. And I think it's just a really good example of how to experiment and work in new ways, even if wherever you're working, maybe not physically located with the person that is next to you. And I think that's just one example of just how I think collectively we should be thinking about, if this is the policy that our organization has, how can we try experiments and test things out to be able to hit the outcomes that we want by making sure that people feel connected to the work that they're doing. There's plenty of other examples out there, but that's just one that comes to mind.
Tara, any additional comment?
Yeah, so I'm very familiar with companies like Atlassian and Doist. I'm not sure if anyone on the panel attends the largest remote work conference in the world in Lisbon for the last 3 years. And so I've had the opportunity of attending there. And I agree with Al, Atlassian has probably done the most in-depth research on maintaining culture. Doist, I think, is a close second. And so, there's not much I can say from a legal perspective, but I do definitely echo Al's comments. I think it is incredibly important to have the team meet periodically, and whether that's once per quarter or more throughout the year, because it really helps to maintain that morale. And I think just the fact that the largest remote work conference in the world is in person tells us enough about that perspective. Legally, there's really not much, I think, to add there. It's really just about morale. And as an employment lawyer, it's really important to have companies that are not necessarily fully remote, but if they are distributed or if they are, a few days in office and sort of operating on this flexible work model, something that we always advise employers to do is that ensuring, although the law hasn't properly responded, that they have the same access to certain opportunities as the in-office workers, and they have the same rights and you have the same obligations. And sometimes those have to be adopted for the remote work environment, for example, for insurance claims, but it's really ensuring that they still feel as though they're part of the team.
Yeah, that gets tricky because it's easier said than done sometimes, just because the contact in office sometimes naturally leads to opportunities on certain projects that you may not have available to you if you weren't sitting there in the office physically.
And at what point does it become a discrimination claim, right? That's where we're having the issue with the law not responding, because you've got certain heads of damages, for example, in Ontario, sorry, not heads of damages, but prohibited heads of discrimination. So you can't discriminate on race, gender, age, sex, ancestry, but remote work is not counted in there, or telework as they call it in Ontario. And so, you know, how do you prevent that sort of discrimination, and how does an employee that's working remotely feel protected when they are not presented with those opportunities that they may be presented with if they were in the office?
Yeah, this is a really it's a real thing. It's called proximity bias. And so somebody could just be closer to you physically working in the same office, or even in the same time zone. We have seen proximity bias. And I know some leaders will intentionally, even if one person is remote, will make the entire meeting remote. And so just ways to be conscious that proximity bias is a real thing, and then taking the steps to make sure that there's equal opportunity to all the people who are involved in that particular product or project.
Al?
Yeah, I would just add to Charlene's point about proximity bias. To be clear, that was probably most likely happening even before the pandemic, right? We didn't going remote. I mean, I think maybe elucidated it and brought it in a bigger light and really shone a light in on it, and maybe forced us to think about it. But that's just something that I think has happened for a really long time. And I think the positive of it in terms of where we are today is that I think it really has shown a light and made leaders really think, if that is not something that you want to promote in your organization, well, then how do you actually have to change how you operate, change your operating rhythm, change your ways of working? Because the fact of the matter is that while it certainly became more acute in a remote environment, for many of us, it was already always there.
Thank you. Oh, Krikey.
Yeah, I was going to add that I love that it was something that was always there, but I think it's also, there's opportunity in that, right? In that if it's something that's kind of hardwired into how we are as humans, there is technology and there is skills and there are courses, or there's things you can do to help you with that, right? You've got CRM management tools, right? You've got all of these different systems that maybe apply from different industries into how can you best build that personal connection? How can you best manage it? How can you best run it, right? In venture capital land, Superhuman is a very, very popular tool to help it seem like you're there, right? You also have, I don't know if you guys love the telemarketers that spoof your local zip code and area code when they call you. So it looks like you're getting a local phone number, but then you find out it's somebody from a different place, right? All things to get through there, right? There's one thing that's changing the system, but then there's also, if you're a young analyst or somebody new to the profession, what do you manage? What do you how do you navigate it, right? And so, you know, it's very important to understand what kind of corporation, what kind of environment you're going into. Because to a certain extent, you should understand how to navigate it so that you can help change it from the inside, right? I love the example of one person's remote, so we're going to have to make the whole thing remote. Like, and I bet you there may be some people that were in the room that actually preferred it that way.
It poses a lot of different, I think, opportunity and challenges for both leaders and employees. So thank you. Let's jump into segment 2.
Upskilling and reskilling are crucial strategies in the evolving job market, driven by technological advancements and changing industry demands. These processes involve acquiring new skills or enhancing existing ones to adapt to new roles and responsibilities. Upskilling refers to learning new skills to improve current job performance or prepare for future roles within the same field. Reskilling involves learning new skills to transition into a different job or field, especially important for roles threatened by automation. Key skills in demand include digital literacy, data analytics, AI, machine learning, and cybersecurity. Soft skills like adaptability, resilience, communication, and collaboration are equally important. Methods for acquiring new skills include online courses, immersive boot camps, and corporate training programs. Collaboration between public and private sectors is essential to address the skills gap, with initiatives like the World Economic Forum's Reskilling Revolution aiming to prepare 1 billion people for tomorrow's economy. Embracing lifelong learning is key to remaining competitive and adaptable in a rapidly changing job market.
This one's interesting. I always hear the phrase, like, the best investment one can make is in yourself. And I feel like when it comes to learning these skills today, maybe that has more value than ever. Al, can you talk about what emerging skills you predict maybe in most demand in the next 5 years, and how can people best prepare for that?
It's a great question. I think many organizations are trying to answer that right now. I mean, I think writ large, I often refer a lot to the World Economic Forum and some of the research that they put out in terms of the most in-demand skills. And I think your intro actually highlighted a number of the ones that are hot. I'm sure at some point Charlene will talk about AI, so I won't talk too much about that one. But I think I'm actually going to go a little bit meta, though. I know some other people on this panel have been working at the intersection of technology and people for almost 2 decades. And if you think about all the different technological changes that have happened over the past couple decades, I think the one constant that remains is that change will always be there. And when change is there, it really means there is an opportunity to upskill and reskill. And so what I'm most interested in and most curious about that I think will help anyone is that I think that people should focus on building a self-sustaining capability to continuously learn and grow. Today might be AI, but it could be something else in the future. But I think what organizations really can focus on if they want to make this come to life in their organization is how do you equip people with those skills that enable people to sense and respond to market challenges and to lean into curiosity to learn the skills that are needed in that moment, can do that continuously over time. And so I'm sure there are other really important ones, but I would say that's the meta skill that I think will enable someone to really be successful in today's world of work.
That's a good one. It does make me wonder, like, does a company need to can they foster a culture of lifelong learning in the workplace? Is that something that can be taught, or is it something that is innate within somebody? Charlene, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think it's actually taught. And it is the organization's commitment to making their people as employable as possible, as able to add value. And as I was saying, so much of it is, can you learn to adapt? Can you be curious? Can you be comfortable being uncomfortable with all the change that's happening? And the one organizations who say, we're investing in you because you're going to need these skills to be successful here or anywhere else that you go to. One organization, I know we'll talk about AI in just a little bit, but one CEO said, we're going to train every single person on how to use AI. We want to be AI ready and AI first. And every single person is going to get a green, yellow, or red light. And green meaning you're using it all the time. Yellow, you're learning it. Red, you're not doing anything. And then he drew a line in the sand and said, there will be no more red lights employed at this company in 6 months. And he said, basically, this is not just about us. It's about you. You are going to have to know these skills. And the more practice you get earlier on to know how you can change the way you work is going to be an essential skill that you will carry with you for the rest of your career. The reality is what we learn now today in college, vocational school, on-the-job training, it's going to be obsolete at some point. You think about the skills we acquired early on in our career and how we have to keep learning to keep up. That has always been the case. And so instilling people not only the skills, but the desire to keep learning is something that an organization, I think, absolutely can do and should be doing.
Sometimes it takes a little tough love. Krikey, your thoughts on like emerging skills that we should be paying attention to?
Yeah, totally. So my first reaction is the concept of search and the idea of being able to get information and prompts, right? Do you start a business that can create AI prompts? Yeah, fine. That's kind of the joke of it, but it's sort of the paradigm shift of, 100 years ago or 50 years ago. Access to information was one of the hardest things to have, right? So a lot of the education system was structured around memorization. Rote memorization was a very common thing to kind of optimize for, right? Because it's hard to look up a number, or it's hard to look up information, it's hard to get that. What we, you see some Gen Z, you see some of this kind of proliferation of internet and search and access and availability of information. It's less about rote memorization, it's more about, can you apply it, right? Can you squeeze the juice out of the lemon? Can you extract the key information? Can you find it on your own? So can you get the search to give you that information, but then can you do something with it, right? So I think you're seeing that skill set shift, right? If you ask people that are, in their 80s, how did they get information? It's a very, very different discussion than how do you get information if you're 18 or if you're 10 or if you're 20 or if you're currently working in a mostly remote company versus a mostly in-person company, right? So being able to figure that out is very important. I think that's kind of the key, unlock to everything else you might need, right? Because yes, you could learn how to code, but the way things are going, you might never actually need to code because things are becoming no code, right? So how do you sort of future proof yourself is go with kind of the actionability, right? Use a lot of technology as an aid to help you. Think of it more as a driver aid than a driver replacement. And I would argue that, to Al's point, curiosity is the number one thing that I look for in employees, right? And as an employer, it's very important for me to match their curiosity with what I need to get done. So if they're curious about the future, then they're probably going to do a great job helping me write a paper about the future. But if they're not curious about it, it's going to be difficult for them, right? So to a certain extent, you have to you can't change the person, you can't change the employee, but you can try and put them in the best position to succeed. And then, yes, there's additional kind of, should we say, short-term skills they might need that'll help them do that. If they're really interested in code in building a program, they might need to know how to code today, but maybe they won't in 30 years. They need to know how to think like a coder.
Yeah. So it's a way of thinking sometimes. Tara, I know that attorneys need to know both that you need to have technical skills, but then you also need soft skills too. I wanted to ask you, what role do you think soft skills play in the evolving job market?
Oh, they're everything, right? Without clients, you don't have a practice. It's just unfortunate that we're not really taught them. You sort of got to learn them on your own to keep going. So I love what Charlene said about, the fact that this has always been the case in the world of work, right? You have always had to upskill. None of us is in the same place that we were when we first started in our careers. So, just to add to that point, and then I'll turn to attorneys specifically, but when you're thinking about up leveling, something that you want to think about from the employment law perspective is sometimes when you have a senior employee, rather than understanding that, they have to meet you where you are and change their skill set or adapt to the new environment, you have to remember that it's often not so easy to let employees go if they do not. And this is where it's really key to have an employment agreement that sets out their duties and responsibilities. Because if you're relying on a 30-year-old employment agreement, it's likely that that skill development was not required. Now you're on the hook for a pretty hefty severance package in at least the at-will states. So, when you're talking about attorneys specifically, it's very interesting because we do have a pretty significant AI influence right now in law. So, for example, I use AI for legal research. I use it for case management. We use it for contract review. And so really soft skills are at the forefront. It is that human approach and that empathetic approach that is going to keep the clients your clients, because a lot of the work can now be done by AI. And so, when I often speak to younger lawyers or lawyers that are just getting used to the adoption of AI, it's really an emphasis on creativity, autonomy, and empathy, because those are the three things that will differentiate you from a lot of these systems that can now help you with some of the mundane tasks, or even some of the more substantive work like drafting and anything else.
Thank you, everybody, for the thoughtful answers. Charlene?
Yeah, one other area I think that's often neglected is upskilling and reskilling leaders. And to Tara's point, oftentimes leaders are left alone to say, well, what skills do you need to have? And one thing I strongly believe is that leaders need to be also trained on how to think about things. So the things that got you here are going to get you there in the future. And that can be really hard for them to understand. So having that change management mindset, the soft skills development, but also how leadership is going to have to change, the way you manage people, the way that people want to be managed, everything from using AI to remote work. So leaders need a lot of this upskilling skills too as well. And we oftentimes just do not invest enough in leadership training.
Yeah, nobody is safe.
I would just add to that and maybe bring this full circle to where we started when you asked, is this something that can be learned in an organization? To Charlene's point, I think if leaders want to actually see people proactively upskilling in their organization, one of the most effective things that they could do is to go and model that themselves, right? If you as a leader can show that you are doing this and investing in it, what that's going to give permission for others to do is to actually go and follow suit. And so I think it absolutely can be done. And I think one of the best ways to increase your chances as an organization of doing it is to have your leaders go first, because that will give permission to everyone else to follow suit.
Amen to that. Let's go to segment 3.
Automation and AI are transforming the job market by automating routine tasks and creating new roles requiring advanced skills. Automation uses technology to perform tasks without human intervention, while AI focuses on systems capable of tasks needing human intelligence, like visual perception and decision-making. Automation impacts sectors like manufacturing, healthcare, customer service, education, and finance. It enhances productivity and reduces costs in manufacturing, streamlines diagnostics and patient care in healthcare, handles routine inquiries in customer service, personalizes learning and education, and improves efficiency in finance. Adapting involves upskilling in digital literacy, data analysis, and AI integration, and reskilling for new roles. Lifelong learning through online courses and training programs is crucial. Strategies include staying informed about AI trends, embracing technological changes, seeking growth opportunities in AI-driven industries, and networking for career support. Adaptation ensures individuals remain competitive in an evolving job market.
All right, so AI. We're definitely talking about AI. Charlene, how can workers develop the necessary skills to stay relevant in an increasingly automated job market?
Well, first of all, I always like to say that AI won't replace you. It's someone using AI who's going to replace you. So the sooner you can get these skills, the better off you will be. And I think of 3 areas in particular to focus on. One is about creating content, writing presentations, audio, video. Really, anytime you are being called on to create content, learn how to use that, use AI in those opportunities too. The second area is in the area of research. So our instinct when we have to do research is to go to Google. And AI, I would encourage people to open up a second tab right next to Google, or even open up a third tab with AI-driven search like Perplexity, and start using that to gauge your research. And the third most powerful area is to use it as a thought partner, to be able to create content or an idea, a plan, and give it to the AI and then have a conversation. I don't think of it as prompt engineering. I think it is a prompt conversation with the AI. And you're asking it, like, what do you think are the strengths and weaknesses of this argument? Give me suggestions. How can I improve? I do it with my writing all the time. And it is a fantastic editor and thought partner. And it's again, a new way of working. And knowing that AI is going to automate you, how do you insert yourself into all the different ways that you do work today to make sure you're harnessing that power?
Tara, what regulatory and legal challenges does AI present to businesses using it?
A lot. So, you know, you got to be careful, right? It's something that is relatively new in law. We tend to move a little bit slow. And so there is not really a lot of legislation that's responding appropriately to the adoption or use of AI. And so, I think the most obvious are cybersecurity issues and, disclosing client information. And so you have to ensure that whichever AI system you're adopting into your practice is vetted. You have to ensure that, there are certain liability issues. If some sort of leak were to occur, liability issues that the AI system would have to deal with and not your organization. And so unfortunately, the law really hasn't done much yet to specify what the requirements are. And there is not enough case law yet to address what, who is liable in a situation where there is some sort of breach. And so it's really just about completing your due diligence and ensuring that the system is vetted and really ensuring that you are sort of, crossing your T's and dotting your I's when it comes to protecting your client information or your corporation information.
Krikey, how can companies maximize the benefits of Gen AI in the workplace?
Yeah, very good question. I mean, I think there's an element of automation there, right? Where generative AI and large language models can really help you reduce some of the repetitive, mundane, routine tasks. But to Charlene's point, I think some of the power in it is using it as a thought partner, right? Using it as a sparring partner. In management consulting, we always talk about kind of cycles, right? And using generative AI can help reduce cycles. You can kind of have more, you can get to output more quickly. But I think the key there is the applicability, right? That higher level thinking is still hard to do without a human oversight, right? You can have a junior analyst create a wonderful synopsis of a 3,000 page report, but somebody still needs to kind of sanity check it, logic check it, fact check it, and then tie it into the greater picture, right? At the moment, it's hard to pull in all of those different external factors into having AI generate that output. Now, what can, specifically what can AI do, especially today, especially in financial services? You see a huge amount of investment and thought around things like customer relationships, right? Chatbots, conversational commerce. But then you also see a lot of things around pattern recognition, right? Which is essentially fraud. So how can we use something that's better at recognizing patterns than we currently are as humans to mitigate fraud is a huge thing in financial services. So it's trying to use AI's strengths for where it's most useful. And a lot of it is often because you can get more cycles out of it. I can have an AI try something 10 different times, which is a lot faster than having a graphics design editor try and create 10 different pictures, right? That takes, but you can get closer and closer and hone closer and closer to what that final product is. It's one of the big assumptions here, which is kind of an interesting concept in overall, is that the end consumer or the end decision maker is a human, right? If you assume that the end decision maker is a human, then cycles are helpful if they help you get towards that final human decision maker. Now, there's the flip side of that coin is there's also an entire economy where it's not a human decision maker. And so then you're optimizing and building a completely different animal. So I just love throwing that in there because it's a very different opposite perspective because people often view AI as how does it help a human, but it can also help a machine.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think over time it will be more and more often that the machine may be making more decisions. Al, you were going to add?
Yeah, no, I was going to just piggyback real quickly 2 points from what Krikey said. So to illustrate his point about the management consulting piece, I think one of the most interesting pieces of early research I've seen out there there was a study done by, I believe, Harvard, Wharton, and the Boston Consulting Group, where they studied about 7% of BCG's consulting workforce and ran an experiment where they had a bunch of people who gave them a bunch of tasks that was relevant work that they were supposed to do without AI. And then they had another group where they allowed them to use generative AI. And they basically did some controlled testing to kind of see what were the outputs. And they had humans kind of judge the final outputs. And so the net of what they found was that based off of the judgments, they found that the people who used AI in conjunction with kind of human thought tended to produce the most creative and most innovative results. And the people who used AI almost as like a default without really thinking about it tended to come up with stuff that wasn't necessarily as novel. It wasn't necessarily as innovative. It still got the thing done. But the net of it was, I think, to what I think Krikey was kind of saying, is that humans plus AI can lead to a lot of really interesting, novel, and unique kind of outputs. And so, in many ways, it really is a really good example of how AI in many cases can augment the work that we're doing. And then the second point I would just add is that agree with what everyone had kind of said about how what AI can do to kind of make our work better. But I think another conversation I would love to see happening, and where I could see a lot of really great opportunity, is even before thinking about AI, of asking the question, what is the actual work that needs to get done? I think it was Peter Drucker, the management thinker, who once said, there's nothing as useless as doing something efficiently that shouldn't be done at all. And if we just continue to use technology and tools to do things better, faster, and cheaper, but are not asking ourselves, well, what is the work that needs to be done in the first place? I think that's just a race to the bottom and maybe not optimizing, the best work that we could be doing. And so I think a really good part of the conversation I would love to see us kind of go into is really giving a chance to ask ourselves, what is the actual work that needs to be done? And then we can start to say, okay, once we get that, who can then do it? Can it be a human? Can it be a machine? Can it be in tandem, et cetera?
Yeah, I'm hearing that AI is certainly a tool, and it's important to be using the tool correctly to get the most out of it. Let's move to segment 4.
In today's rapidly evolving job market, traditional college degrees are no longer the only route to a successful career. New-collar jobs, particularly in tech, healthcare, and advanced manufacturing, prioritize practical skills and competencies over formal education. Certifications, boot camps, apprenticeships, and online courses offer alternative pathways to gain these in-demand skills. These roles are perfectly aligned with remote and hybrid work models that are reshaping corporate landscapes and seamlessly integrating with the ongoing upskilling and reskilling wave. As automation and AI continue to transform industries, new-collar jobs provide viable and lucrative opportunities. This approach not only broadens access to career advancement, but also ensures a more adaptable and resilient workforce. Explore how to identify and acquire the skills needed for these dynamic roles and optimize your career in this new era of work. By embracing new-collar opportunities, individuals can build successful, future-proof careers without the traditional college route.
This segment brings up a lot of different thoughts in my head, partially because I have 3 college tuitions. I have 3 kids that I have in the future. And I'm wondering, do they need to go to college or do they not need to go to college? And I did notice that, I think it was February of 2024, UPenn's engineering, they announced the first Ivy League undergraduate degree in artificial intelligence. And I just wonder, with a new technology like Gen AI, I'm not sure to what extent a company looking to hire, are they going to be looking for a specific degree from an applicant, or are they going to be looking for somebody who is self-taught and maybe implementing Gen AI in their job in a unique or novel way? Krikey, do you think that there will be non-college educational pathways that will become increasingly valuable in the future job market?
I hope yes, right? I hope there isn't this sort of stigma between vocational school versus, let's call it, a liberal arts general college education, right? Because in theory, what you mean by a vocational school is you're getting taught to actually do something. And when you go to college, in theory, you're also getting taught to actually do something. So it'd be fun to see those things merge, right? Because who says AI is not a vocation, right? Who says that somebody who does that can't be a vocation and can't be something you do, right? As an employer, experience trumps kind of everything else, right? And so in the absence of experience, you look for other, you could call it virtue signals or certifications, or other components that tell you that this person will be able to learn on the job or has the aptitude. So yeah, I really hope there will be, and I think there is, right? You're seeing that education is sort of ripe for disruption, you could say. There's a professor at NYU, Galloway, who loves to kind of get on a soapbox about a lot of challenges with education. Um, Sorry, did I lose you guys?
Nope.
Nope, we're here.
Okay. Challenges with education, but it's because, and one of his hypotheses and one of his sort of, you could call it scenarios, is that big tech gets into education, right? Because as it becomes more clear what the thing you need to do is a thing, is a widget, is an X, is a Y, why not get certification that you can do just that, right? And so instead of being a general education, it's a specific education. And as we get more digitized and as kind of employment becomes more flexible and you can kind of go where you're needed for a specific use and a task, right? As the market becomes more liquid, to use finance terms, there becomes more value in those specific certifications, specific skill sets.
Charlene, how about you? What are your thoughts on this one?
I think the growth of online sites like Udemy, Coursera, LinkedIn Learning is evidence that people are taking the learning into their own hands because they're not getting it from schools. They're not getting it from their employers. And yet they see the need for these new skills coming into the market. So certifications, whatever those things may be, are moving beyond just the technical skills into areas like management, into AI, into the softer skills, as well as the technical skills. So I do believe, and again, I have two students who went through college, went in computer science, the other one went into music. And I'm like, we can skip the whole college thing because in both of those areas, you don't necessarily need a degree to be successful. You can learn a lot of those skills through practice, through online courses, through YouTube videos, and they both decided to go to college for that. And so I still think that there is an imprimatur of effort that's associated with a college degree, but the actual skills needed to be successful in a job, the competencies. I love how some schools like Southern New Hampshire University are creating online courses and not just certification, but actual degrees based on competency, not semester hours spent in the classroom, because semester hours were designed to be able to give professors a way to measure their accomplishments. So we have this antiquated way of delivering 8 semesters, 4 years to get a degree that don't necessarily create competent workers. So if instead you can have a degree, so to speak, and certification that you're competent at writing copy, at doing marketing, at doing sales processes, those will count a lot more, I believe, when you're hiring for these jobs.
Krikey?
Yeah, I was dying to have for why college is important is sort of a reframe as to, is college about gaining the skills or is it about the socialization and the kind of personal growth and development, right? And so there's a bit of a reframe there of what are you actually looking for and what are you trying to do? What is your objective? Which I think is something that the current traditional education system is grappling with, right? How much, to be slightly flippant, how much of education is daycare versus how much of it is teaching? How much of it is learning? How much of it is learning or having kind of opportunity to make mistakes, to learn how to work in a group, right? To figure out who you want to become. So yeah, it's not the best at giving skills, but it might be a not bad way to make wholesome people, humans.
You guys sound very practical. It sounds like you need a little bit of both. Al?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it feels like, at least in the United States, with the major universities and colleges that exist, there's almost kind of like a moment right now where they're having kind of that conversation around, like, what do I want to be when I grow up, right? Because traditionally, I think the ways in which we have typically looked at higher education in the United States, while some of them still apply, there's kind of a shift in terms of how we see it. I think more tactically, I mean, if you just look at the United States and if you actually look at the numbers, I mean, I think it's something like to the effect of maybe 44 to 45% of Americans over 25 have attended, college or completed their degree programs. And so if you're just looking at it from a numbers perspective, there are still a lot of people in the United States, the majority, who don't necessarily go to a 2 or 4 year institution. And I think it's easy to forget about that because so much of the conversation, by people like us, but our colleagues is often around the 2 or 4 year degree. But I think what's really interesting, and I know some of us on this panel are on the speaker circuit. I've done a lot of talks this year with professional and trade organizations and associations and a lot of other industries. The demographic shifts in the United States and many other countries are really going to necessitate that some of these trade organizations and associations find really capable pools of talent because of how many people are eventually going to be leaving the workforce and not enough people entering the workforce who are entering those professions. And so I think collectively in the United States, I mean, yes, I think colleges and universities need to kind of think and reevaluate their fundamental value proposition. But I think collectively as a society in the United States, we would be much better off if we found more ways to make on-ramps into professions more accessible, because in 5 to 10 years, we're really going to start to feel some of those demographic pinches. And getting our house in order, I think, will be really important so that we can continue to thrive just collectively as a society in the United States.
Excellent point.
Yeah.
Charlene, did you have something to add?
Yeah, one of my biggest concerns around hiring is that right now, the way we hire is through mechanized ways of reviewing resumes. And they put a very high score on some sort of formal education. And so if you don't have formal education, but you have incredible competencies that don't come through on a resume. So I almost feel like the resumes and the way we evaluate people, I mean, the very first thing they ask is a resume. And so while there may be skills on there, but there are no ways to actually measure competencies in these areas. So where are the recommendations? Where are the projects that you can work on? What are the ways that you can demonstrate that? So until our hiring process actually takes advantage of that rich profile of somebody, we're going to be stuck in this rut of the external ways of validating someone's ability to think and work. And so that I think there's a chicken and egg here in that how can we evaluate somebody if we don't have the information? So I think some of the work that people like SuccessFactors are doing is to take that information and make it available because it's in your employment records, to associate the skills that you have with your profile that you can carry with you from job to job. And so that becomes a profile of your skills and capabilities that you can then evaluate more so than a single piece of paper or your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, I was going to add, I see a shift coming where the value or the mechanism of apprenticeship becomes increasingly important, where it's currently less valued, right? Because yes, it would be magical to have portable validation that you can do a job. It's very difficult to do at current day. And the mechanism that we used hundreds of years ago was apprenticeship, right? Yeah. An internship, or I mean, it's less of an internship. It's more of apprentice, right? It's almost kind of like work for free until you can show that you can do this. And then you find out if you like it or not. But it's that's a commitment. It's hard. You can't, not everybody can work for free forever.
No, it's super interesting that you bring that model up because that just has a rich tradition, right? So even with AI and all these different technologies and apps that we have at our disposal, It may boil down to that master apprentice relationship so that somebody can learn that competency. Al?
Yeah, and I think to what the point that Charlene was making, there's one side of this equation, which is what is the kind of education, training, experience that people need in order to be ready to do a job. But to the point I think that Charlene made, that can only get us so far unless we actually fundamentally rethink what it means in terms of what makes someone ready to be able to do a task, activity, or job. And even if we figure out the stuff of the former, unless we change the latter approach, it's only going to get us so far. And it does kind of make me think and reflect. I mean, this was before I was born, but my parents worked at Xerox Corporation, and back in the heyday, where they made it very clear to me that Xerox invested in their people, that trained their people. They had all sorts of development programs. And it's not just Xerox, it was GE. It was many of those companies in the 50s, 60s, and 70s where at once upon a time, apprenticeship was inculcated as part of the employer value proposition. And for a multitude of different reasons, I think collectively we have gotten away from that. And I do think that in addition to the movement that we've had with some organizations who have said, hey, we're going to remove kind of education-based requirements from our job descriptions, which I think is a good start. I think if we want to start to see some really transformative changes in terms of how people get access to opportunities, it's got to be more than just removing that requirement. It's actually got to be a fundamental shift in terms of the role that employers play in facilitating apprenticeship and onboarding and learning for either their employees or prospective employees for that.
Yeah, I was gonna. I love that. I love it, and I would add that I think trying to make it actionable to a young person today. I think it's never been easier to try something, right? It's never been the kind of, in a weird way, the workforce has never been more fluid and more liquid. And so if, we joke that if you want to be a good venture capitalist, how do you become a good venture capitalist? By being a good venture capitalist, right? So what does that mean? If you want to invest, right? You can go on Robinhood and you can invest 5 cents, right? But it's never been easier to try things. So that's why I think that apprenticeship will be the flip side of that coin. Is how do the organizations take advantage of the ability for people to try things better? And then you get that ever so valuable experience, right? You have that result you can show, right? You want to be a creative designer, you want to be a creative director, you can go make a movie. And so you can show them, and you can show a senior person, fine, maybe you're not perfect yet, but hey, I can see where you're going. I can see results. And so you're no longer tied to that piece of paper that has, the name of some other thing that gives you a mental shortcut into maybe this person can do the job or not, right? So how do we kind of destroy the stereotypes that are not helping us, when really what we're trying to do is just figure out if someone can do the work or not? It's like, hey, show me you can do it, right? I think that's why you also see more case study interviews. Yes, you get screened, you get vetted, but then the final decision is do the job. Do you like it? Are you good at it? Do you fit with our culture on doing it? And, hey, then we have a slam dunk, right? We have less turnover. We can invest better in what your gaps are. It all kind of helps.
That's great stuff. I love it. I will continue to contribute into my kids' 529 college savings plans and encourage everyone to do the same. Let's move to our final segment.
Building a sustainable career in a dynamic job market requires strategic planning, flexibility, continuous learning, and personal brand development. Setting clear short-term and long-term goals provides focus and direction. Adaptability is crucial for evolving career plans in response to new opportunities and challenges. Staying updated with industry trends and technological advancements helps anticipate changes. Regularly updating skills through online courses, workshops, and certifications enhances both technical and soft skills. Embracing a mindset of continuous improvement keeps you marketable and opens new career paths. Developing a personal brand involves identifying your unique value proposition and leveraging online platforms like LinkedIn to showcase expertise. Consistency across all platforms builds trust and recognition. Learning from the success stories of others and seeking mentorship provides valuable guidance and support. By incorporating these strategies, individuals can create resilient career paths and ensure professional growth and personal fulfillment in an ever-changing job market.
Well, I know this episode's going a little long. I hope that the panelists are all okay on time. Tara had to drop out at the top of the hour, so I'm glad that she was able to make it at the beginning. I'm kind of curious on this one. Like, what should professionals be doing to strategically plan for their careers to stay ahead of this constantly evolving job market? And then the flip side of that is, how do you know when or how to pivot if you see technology changing your job in possibly a negative way? Charlene, you want to start?
There. Okay. Yeah. So a couple things. First of all, some of the best advice I got in terms of managing my career was, first of all, your career is the most important asset you will ever manage in your life. So spend time on it. And I like to say that we spend more time managing our music playlists than we do our careers. So I think actually spending time on it, doing assessments, spending time and really thinking about what your trajectory is. And I've been in the business and technology space for 25, 30 years and have been evolving with all the technologies along the way. And so knowing when to pivot, when to persist is one of the biggest questions in life. The way I like to think about it, the best advice I got was to look out 18 months and say, where do you want to be 18 months from now? Because planning more than that, you don't know how the future is going to look. But 18 months is long enough that you can start making choices and decisions today on where you want to be 18 months from now. So that has worked really well for me. I see it in lots of different ways of people doing planning. It allows you to do then every quarter a quick check-in to say, does that 18 months still work? And to keep extending it another 18 months. And so this is a continuous process. It is not one and done. It is constantly scanning the environment, looking at how things are changing, assessing, is your portfolio of skills still going to be relevant 18 months from now? What new skills do you need to add to that to continue to stay on top of things?
Al, how about your thoughts?
Yeah. So I've spent a lot of time over the past decade talking with leaders about their careers. And I think one of the interesting observations that I've made in all of my conversations has been when I've asked leaders, how did you learn how to manage your career? So many of them say one of two things. The first thing they say is, I don't really know if I've ever learned. And the second thing I've heard is that it kind of just happened by accident. And I think that is a miss in terms of collectively about how we've approached, I think, career development in the past. And so I definitely agree with what Charlene's saying in terms of it is a continuous and iterative process. And one of the things that I like to think about is this idea of how do I create specific habits and practices and just put them in place so that I'm consistently being in motion with my own career development. Whatever I'm doing now is probably not going to be the thing that I'm going to be doing forever. I think that's a pretty fair statement for me to make. So even if I don't know what the next 3 to 5 to 10 years of my career is going to look like, how do I just put into place good habits and practices so that I'm constantly thinking and evolving around my career development and growth and taking actions that help me make progress towards that next milestone, whatever it is. And so I think it's kind of taking this idea of career development or managing career as a monolithic thing and bringing it down to kind of small habits and practices. I like to think of it as, let's think about drum beats versus like a lightning bolt. Drum beats are small little actions that you can take, whereas a lightning bolt is like that one major thing. And I think the other thing that I would just say is that I think there's an opportunity for us, particularly in the education system, to start thinking about not only how do we prepare someone to land an interview or to get a job, but how do we arm them with a set of portable career navigation skills that can help them consistently evolve, as Charlene said, throughout the majority of their career. When you enter the workforce, that first job is not going to be your last one. So it's not just about landing your first job. It's about how do you develop those core career navigation skills so that you can sense and respond to opportunities that may come your way. And I don't think we've gotten there yet. It's part of what motivates me to do the work that I'm doing. But I think that would enable people and to be able to kind of navigate through, even if we don't know what's always going to happen next, how can we at least arm ourselves and be prepared and be confident that even if we don't have all the answers, we're going to be moving in the right direction.
Krikey, in your experience, any comments on strategic planning a career?
Yes, lots. But first, I wanted to comment on how good the voiceover for the videos were. They're good. They're fun. But it's an interesting thing where, you know, hey, what if AI helped you do that? Would that make you stronger at your job? Would it make you less? Would it allow you to do the high value tasks versus the low value tasks, right? Since we've been talking about AI and the future of work, right? But I think it's an interesting concept of what are the high value tasks and what are the low value tasks, right? And you go into that and you go into jobs, I think more and more nowadays, trying to get a better understanding. It's good to go into your job understanding what you would like to get out of it, right? What are the skills that you want to get? What are the hard skills? What are the soft skills? What are you going to work for, right? So taking Charlene's 18 months, what are your metrics at 18 months, right? What's your, you know, I can't remember the acronym, but the goals that are measurable, accountable, that you can see, that you can hit at that point so that you know you're progressing and going forward. That's one thing, right? That's the short-term vision. Then you kind of try and tie that into the longer-term vision, which I think really comes into, you know, every year or every so often, reevaluate where you are. What do you like of your job? What do you dislike of your job? Why do you dislike it? Why do you like it? And how do you get more of that? And then how do you get better at the things you're good at, right? So to a certain extent, you know, you want to be good enough for the things you don't like doing. But the stuff that you're good at, you want to be a superstar, right? You want to be the best player on the team at the stuff that you enjoy doing. So how do you get to that stage? How do you add to those skill sets? You know, what are your drum beats, as Al said, to pull in to develop your superpowers, right? And what superpowers do you like using? What superpowers do you have that you don't like using, right? Understand those different things. I personally find myself in this strange universe where, you know, I thought I was always going to be in the corporate landscape, and I'm no longer in the corporate landscape. So there was a big moment of introspection for me personally of, you know, in VC world, what are the parts that I actually enjoy doing? What are the parts that I not like doing? And how do I do more of each? Or how do I enable doing less of the stuff I don't like, right? I don't love processing payroll. So how do I make payroll easier? How do I make sure that I'm acceptable at payroll, but I can do the stuff that I love, right? Being a management consultant, having come from a management consulting background, how do I spend more time with my startups? How do I spend more time with my founders? How do I make sure that I'm prepared to give them nuggets that break their brain, right? How do I give them that insight that then cracks how they were thinking of the future, right? When I worked with certain people, they assumed that humans were always the decision maker. I worked with them, I saw that that was an opportunity, and I said, okay, I like doing that. Let me show you that nugget that changes your perspective, reopens your eyes, lets you re-perceive the universe and keep doing, right? So I would say, how do you keep career planning? How do you keep evolving is really introspection, number one, right? Take the time to be introspective. It's more important than anything else in everything you do to be introspective. What do you enjoy? What do you dislike? And build those drum beats. A lot of people are overwhelmed by the big, heavy task, right? They say, I want to be a CEO. Okay, but what does a CEO mean? What does a CEO mean to you? What does that mean? Oh, well, I want to be my own boss. Okay, well, can you be your own boss by working, you know, an hour on editing a video and making X amount of dollars for that? Why aren't you doing that now? Oh, but I have a day job. Okay. Is there a part of your day job that doesn't have a legal limitation that won't prevent you to do that? So is there a part of your day job that allows you to do that? Start doing it, right? It's a little bit of that, you know, small steps, gets rid of the scaries, and you just sort of make it happen, right? And next thing you know, you're like, hey, I actually enjoy what I'm doing. I still hate some stuff, but on the balance, I like it more than I don't.
Well,
And it's having
Krikey,
that conversation with yourself.
Thank you for the compliment on the voiceover. I will take it under advisement that maybe I should have AI do the voiceover for me. Charlene, quick question, because this segment talks about building a personal brand. You're very active on LinkedIn. You're a LinkedIn top voice. Any insights that you can share in that respect for professionals? Like, how important is it to establish and build and cultivate a personal brand?
I think it's everything because it's who you stand for, who you are about. And even if you don't post content constantly, your LinkedIn profile, what you say about yourself, about your experiences, gives people an idea of who you are. Because guess what people do before they go have a meeting with you? They look at your LinkedIn profile. And do you have the information on there that would help them understand you better? And I find that most people write their LinkedIn profiles. First of all, they did it years ago when they joined. They haven't updated really much in any sense. And so, what information do other people need to hear from you to understand more about who you are, how you work, how you create value? And the way I think about it, this is not about bragging about yourself. It's really about being helpful. So every piece of content that I write, I have a very clear idea who my audience is, what are their needs, what are their challenges, and I am there to support them and to help them. So that's everything to do with what my brand means to other people.
I'd love to add that I always harass my MBA students that it's not always about what you are, but who you are. And it's a different journey to discover each of those things.
Al, any final thought?
Yeah, one model that I've always lived by, which is I think helped and served me really well, is this idea of learn and teach. I'm a big believer that everyone has the ability to both learn and teach in any room that they're in. So as you're thinking about how to be able to kind of build your personal brand, think about in the context of on LinkedIn, there's something that you can learn out there. And so go figure out what that is and how you want to do it. But there's something that you can teach to other people that would benefit them as well. And that's something I've tried to model in my life in every room that I've been in and everywhere I've gone. And I can say selfishly, it's worked out okay for me so far. And so that would be the piece of advice I would give.
Any closing thoughts from any of the rest of our panelists?
Yeah, just one last thought about creating content, because I hear from a lot of people, well, what can I say that's unique and new and different? And I agree, everything that has been said or will be said will probably have been said by somebody else. But the thing is, you haven't said it. You haven't brought your experience, your perspective. I love what Krikey was saying about, who are you? And that reflection of your experience, your wisdom being put out there is a really special gift. And so I really encourage people to think about that as a gift and to be able to share your voice, have a voice about how the world is working, how you sit in it and where you are.
Well, I want to thank the Inspired Moneymakers for tuning in today, for listening, for watching. We went long, so a big thank you to the panelists who stuck it out and shared so much valuable insights and information. Just some quick takeaways. I think we covered a lot here, but some of the basic things are just to remain curious, to always be learning, and to be cultivating this desire for continued learning within yourself. It's important to be reskilling, and not only reskilling, but setting the goal. What is it that you want to achieve? What are you trying to do? In that way, you can reskill appropriately and do the things that are going to get you to your goal. I love that Krikey talked about try things. With technology, we can try so many different things. So whether you're a business leader, encourage your people to try new things. If you're in a job, be willing to do things that take you out of your comfort zone, and then plan 18 months ahead. Love that idea. Really focus about who you are. It's not necessarily what you are. And maybe personal branding. Maybe spend some more time on LinkedIn. I look forward to seeing you there. All of our panelists today, I encourage you to follow them. You can find out more. Charlene Li is author of 6 books. Is there a 7th book coming out soon, Charlene?
Yes, there is one on generative AI, Winning with Generative AI, the 90-Day Blueprint for Success. That'll be coming out later this summer.
Congrats, that's the new one. So keep an eye out for that. You can find Charlene at Charlene Li, that's li.com. Kristofer Krikey Perez is a senior advisor at Future Today Institute. You can find him at futuretodayinstitute.com. Krikey, anywhere else you want people to follow you or find you?
Yeah, Global Paytech Ventures is my venture capital arm, and LinkedIn is the best way to get a hold of me I mean, what we do is build networks, right? We build relationships. It's all about relationships, and my one closing thought is also have some fun, right? Like, make sure you have fun at what you're doing. Otherwise, life's too short.
Amen to that. What is life without fun? And Al D, he has the Edge of Work podcast, which is great. Check that out. You can find him at al-d, that's DEA.com. Al, anywhere else you want people to follow you?
They can find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. We'll keep it easy. I'll have that in the show notes. Make sure everybody's LinkedIn contact and links are easy to find. I think that Inspired Money will have another episode later this week, either on Wednesday or Friday. I'm still assembling the panelists, waiting for some confirmations to come in. But we're going to be talking about the art of giving back, creative ways to make a difference. It's going to be a great conversation. Thank you for joining me today. And until next time, do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.